All right, Kate, let's get her going here. And we'll start right at the top of the PFF big board with a man that nobody was really aware of last year because he was kind of buried on a depth chart that included Roshan Johnson and some guy named Bijan Robinson. It's Texas's Jonathon Brooks, who burst onto the scene this year as a one-year starter. Kate, tell us about Mr. Brooks there out of Texas.
Jonathon Brooks really probably is the one prospect that I could have pictured maybe sneaking into the late first round here. Unfortunately, as soon as he got that full-time role after playing behind Bijan, behind Roshan, finally got that lead role as a lead back. Fortunately, tore his ACL in early November, but what you're looking at with Jonathon Brooks, and hopefully the fact that he is young amidst suffering that torn ACL, is going to give him a nice and speedy recovery. You're looking at a guy with fresh legs, 238 rush attempts to his name throughout college. So, like, you're getting as fresh legs as you could possibly muster. 6 foot tall, 216 pounds. He's got decent build, solid length. And boy, the advanced metrics for him, it really pop off the page. 3.91 yards after contact per attempt, that ranked in the 82nd percentile among running backs in 2023. 34% missed forced tackle rate, that ranked 30th among 585 qualifying running backs. 90.1 PFF rushing grade. He's smooth. He has got soft hands, capable as a receiver, capable as a route runner. Averaged 1.5 yards per route run in 2023. Not super experienced. So that might be a knock on Jonathon Brooks. But with the running back position in general, I do think that's kind of a give and a take, right? Like, not super experienced. So not necessarily going to be the most proficient at maybe reading blocks at times, reading the field. And I think he could use some, more vision at times. Not a huge problem for him, but if we're going to be picking and choosing here. But all of that's going to come with time. And with that lack of experience comes those fresh legs, as I mentioned. So Jonathon Brooks, overall, I think pretty much the consensus RB1, and that's about the only consensus pick we have in this class.
Yeah, it feels like he's been pretty consensus at the top of most people's boards right now. And I mean, I get it for sure. Like, again, even though it's a smaller sample with him as a one-year starter, like, you watch him, he's a strong runner. He's got good contact balance. He's able to fight through contact and keep his legs moving, which helps him push for those extra yards. And he's not easily stopped. He's difficult to slow down unless you're getting ideal contact on him as a defender. And that's where a lot of like Brooks's success came from, in delivering that additional yardage on top of what his team provided for him, right? Including that 95th percentile missed tackles forced per attempt, 0.34, and 87th percentile yards after contact per attempt, 4.1. So that's among prospects, running back prospects since 2017 or 2018. He's got a good combination of great cuts and speed, where he's able to make moves, make defenders miss, and then not lose momentum or get slowed up, which, you just watch the game against Kansas, for example, this past year. If you want kind of the full showcase of that, he's pretty unreal in that one. But nice hands as a receiver too. Like, he wasn't overly involved as a receiver. I think 29 targets, 25 receptions, make some good catches in there on some slightly off target throws. But, like any running back, he's not without his drops either. But again, turns into a threat with the ball in his hands as a receiver as well. 0.48 missed tackles forced per reception, best mark in this year's class since 2022. And again, smaller sample size because he basically didn't play in 2022, but he makes up for it a little bit in 2023. So yeah, he'll be really interesting. His production profile, as well as the torn ACL, probably pushes him closer to the end of the second round, maybe early third if he really starts to fall. But as far as expected draft capital goes, but just one-year starter. But like you said, we understand why that is. He had a pretty difficult depth chart to overcome there in Texas for most of his career. But 21 years old, he's got ideal size for the NFL. He's capable of handling those short yardage and goal line opportunities. And like every single running back in this class, there's at least a chance that, he doesn't come right in and start day one specifically for him, not being a guaranteed, like you said, just being relatively inexperienced. But, draft capital, landing spot, obviously just going to play a huge part for this entire class. And I think, his chances at least of contributing year one, maybe behind an established NFL starter, are pretty good, with a chance for maybe a true breakout in year two for him.
Yeah, and he's one of these guys that I think just a natural runner, really shifty. You love to see that shiftiness and agility, especially with the fact that like he also has the size to back it up. I think generally like a solid pass blocker, which is going to help him, I think find some snaps in terms of like a true 3-down role. And for me in this class, I don't know that there's a ton of guys that I think day one could come in, obviously health being the predominant factor for Brooks, but there's not a ton of guys that I think coming in day one could step into a field healthy and take on a 3-down role. And for me, Brooks is kind of that guy. Like, inexperience aside, I do think he is probably the most complete prospect in this class, but again, incomplete because of that questionable health. But by all accounts, I don't think we've heard really anything negative coming out about, his rehab process or anything like that. So overall, pretty concerning. And we'll kind of see how that shakes out and if that has an impact on his overall draft stock. But doesn't really seem like that has been the narrative at this point.
Yeah, it sounds like, just like from hearing, about medicals through the combine and stuff like that, it seems like he's on track there to potentially be ready for the start of the year, which is a nice sign. And like you said, it's going to be tough for any of these guys to come in and be starters day one, especially with so many of the ideal running back landing spots basically being filled up in free agency with a lot of like established veterans and good NFL running backs. So there's not going to be a lot of great landing spots. I have a hard time imagining, more than a couple of these guys really being fantasy relevant year one, but Brooks at least has a decent chance of potentially being that guy here in 2024 if he's healthy.
Yeah. And I mean, even as far as landing spots go, there are still a few teams that have, I think, a relative glaring need, right? Like Devin Singletary leading the backfield for the New York Giants. I
like Singletary, but yeah.
I like Singletary, but for me, in terms of projecting him for like a 3-down workload, no way. Like I don't necessarily know that he's going to be the guy that's going to carry a backfield. And the Giants have a ton of needs, but I mean, the Raiders, like I think could be an interesting landing spot. Obviously the Cowboys, who I think it's their team doctor actually did Jonathon Brooks's ACL surgery. So little fun connection there. Like, I mean, if Jonathon Brooks lands in Dallas, let's say, which, he's going to be presumably available here in the second round, that I think like in dynasty leagues bumps him up to like a top 12 dynasty running back right out of the gate. There are some like I know it feels like with the free agent market, there's not a ton of landing spots, but I do think there's a few good spots. I don't want to poo-poo it too hard.
No, there definitely is, right? Like Dallas obviously being the big one. Like if he goes there, if he wasn't everybody's consensus number one back, he'd probably jump to that spot pretty quickly for fantasy purposes. And yeah, for what it's worth, like we're working through like our 7-round all analyst mock draft right now here at PFF. And John Owning, our wonderful editor here, is a big Dallas Cowboys fan. He's controlling the Cowboys, and even he took Jonathon Brooks in the second round for the Dallas Cowboys. So if he's willing to get behind it, I can imagine that, a lot of us would be able to get behind that for sure. So it'll be interesting. I can't wait to see what happens there, because Dallas, they have to draft a running back. It's just, it's going to be almost a guarantee. So we'll see if it's Brooks or not, but whoever it is, I think is going to get some fantasy love for sure.